And we don't need machine learning to tell us that. We can start with really basic principles, and you can make a compelling case that doing a mathematically principled statistical analysis will help you make better decisions than just relying on your intuition in, say, medical contexts, for instance. But at the same time, in machine learning outside of the arts, there is a growing discussion around trust. Often this is centered on the fact that machine learning algorithms can be, they're black boxes. Even if you understand the math of how they work, you may not understand why they come to the conclusions they come to once they've been trained. And most of the work has focused on how to open up that black box and give people explanations for why the machine learning algorithm is telling you the things it's telling you. And I'm running a workshop at the CHI conference in a couple weeks, the Human Computer Interaction Conference, and one of the people who's presenting at this workshop has a really wonderful and very depressing paper that shows you that if you give people explanations from the machine learning algorithms, yes, they will trust them more, and often that completely replaces their human sense of judgment, and they end up making worse decisions because there are edge cases that the algorithms can't handle, and people just don't even notice it. So it's a big unsolved problem in lots of application areas.
One question over there.
It's also a comment because I found it very interesting now to talk about trust, black boxes, and from the sociology point of view, that's how we describe social humans. I mean, we are black boxes for each other, that's why we need trust. And no machines have the level of their black boxes too, and we can kind of treat them like human beings. That's really a turning point now that humans become sort of new members of communication of society because they are black boxes and they surprise us. And that's AlphaGo and so on, that's so fascinating examples. And that's why we need to kind of use these terms of trust to handle these machines, but they are still machines. But in day-to-day life, I guess in the future people will handle them as human beings because now they're able to take part in our way of communication. They're reused in 1,000 years.
That's a very fascinating analogy, comparing the black box of machines to the black box of humans. One interesting, I think, big difference of it's obviously many differences, but what I want to focus on is, we're able to model humans because we can understand their kind of goal-oriented behavior and stuff. Whereas with machines, so humans have their own agency, whereas machines, especially all of these algorithms, I talk about this in my talk this afternoon, the reason we have AI right now, we've had AI since the 50s, but there's a huge explosion of AI research right now. It's because we're just coming out of a huge phase of big data. And this data is meaningless without a way of understanding it. And all of this, we have all this AI right now because Facebook, Google, NSA, GCHQ need it. Because they don't know what to do with it. So the big danger is that all of these, well, not just the algorithms, most importantly the data that trains the algorithms are owned by these companies. So these machines, or the systems, it's not that the systems aren't objective. They're being put to use by these big companies. So that's where it gets really worrying. When I was talking about Craig Blanchard and all the DNA stuff, I was being provocative, and I think it is something that we should think about, because everyone's talking about the dangers of data, but actually, meanwhile, in the background, this is happening. So in 10 years' time, it's going to hit us. But the most immediate danger of all of this is the fact that another big area of research is finance. So these items are being put to you, like I've met so many PhD people, I'm doing machine learning too, what are you doing? Finance. Already 70% of Wall Street is run by algorithms, and so what this is going to help do is it's going to help just widen the gap. That is going to happen. I don't want to bring it down even more, but
You're optimistic.
I'm optimistic because machine learning can also help me photosynthesize, and I think that would be great when humans can start photosynthesizing. So, yeah.
One of the things, did you guys, sorry, there are a bunch of questions. But did you notice, Memo, that China just said, fuck all these ethical concerns, and they just genetically engineered a embryo against the AIDS virus? Did you see this?
Oh, yeah.
They're like, fuck your conversation around morality. We're going to skip way ahead, and we're just going start human engineering. And that was really, I saw that and I was like, whoa, okay, that's going to happen. That's going to be a thing where ethical frameworks are not present and governments are going to just say, hey, let's go ahead and start human engineering. And that's just going to be a thing. So, right. So questions, there was a ton of them.
There's loads of questions and we've not got any time left, but we can take maybe one more. There was one back there, yeah, sorry.
One thing that's sort of impinged on what you're saying about trust, obviously you have a situation where you've got the black box, you've got lots of inputs. Now, those inputs are going to be copyrights. So the question is, at what point do you own the output rather than the creators? I wonder if there's actually some argument for an owning system which actually can produce some audit trail. So given the output, it can actually give you some traceability to where that came from. Again, from the trust, let's say you're using this to control something dangerous or whatever, you can actually get some insight into what information it's actually using to sort of know how much to trust that out, or in some cases know how much you own that out. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely possible with some of the existing algorithms, and the workshop paper that I mentioned a few minutes ago was using that kind of process to say, okay, here's the way that the machine, here's the output that was generated, and here's why, pointing back to the inputs. The problem is when that logic is faulty and those inputs shouldn't necessarily lead you to conclude that that's the right output as a person, people often didn't notice, and so it wasn't helpful.
And another problem is that it is simple statistics. I mean, I say simple. So first of all, in the big cases, the data is so high dimensional that the reason it's being put to these algorithms in the first place is because we can't comprehend what's going on. But then the other problem is that it is statistics, and like Phoenix said, predictive policing, the algorithm says that there's an 80% chance that there's going to be something happening here. Now, that's just statistics. It doesn't mean that it is going to happen, it doesn't mean that it should happen. What's important is how it colors our biases, because it's very tempting to say, oh, the machine said that's going to happen. So it's one thing for, and this happens to engineers as well, it happens to the best of us. So I think that's the biggest risk, not necessarily just the accountability, because the output might be correct. In the best case scenario, it might actually be, yeah, there was an 80% chance of there being a crime there. But what does that even mean? But that's, I think, at least the question that I struggle with, like understanding the statistics. Then there's a case where it might actually be wrong as well, that numerically wrong, which is, then you can try and trace it back.
I think we should have a couple more questions actually, so who had a question? One there, yeah, and then one over there afterwards. Yeah,
okay, so we've come a long way from specifically saying to computers and machines, we need you to do this and that, and now we, like Fazil is just explaining, and they sort of understand that what we want. So what do you think, where it's heading? So are they going to figure out about themselves in the future? I mean, where is it going to evolve from here?
Future question. Let's go first.
So very quickly, that's a good question. The biggest thing that's been trying to solve right now is with general purpose learning. So self-aware robots taking over is on no one's agenda except for the press and Hollywood. The big thing that really people are trying to solve is general purpose learning, transfer knowledge, etc. And what that means is, so like chess was an example of the exact opposite, which is it only plays chess, like that's all you can do. AlphaGo, even though the architecture was designed to play Go, it could relatively easily be adapted to do other things. So the algorithm itself is general purpose. DeepMind, they also, for example, 2 years ago, before they got bought by Google, did this on Atari. I don't know if you know this research. They built AI to play Atari games by watching the screen and knowing nothing about the rules or even the controls. So the system watches the screen, randomly presses the keys, and figures out how to play the rules of the game. And they apply the exact same algorithm without changing it. So I think about 100 games, and it ended up playing better than humans. So this is the goal. The goal is to be able to design a system that can learn anything. And if this happens, this is going to change everything. It really is. Because I want to compare it to when we switched from single-purpose mechanical computers during World War I. Like, there were computers back then that did all trajectory tracking everything. And then when we changed to general purpose computers. These are computers that can compute any function. That's when everything, like, that's the world that we live in. We've got internet, we've got spaceships, we've got everything. So the paradigm shift now is to push for computers that can learn any function. And when that happens, it is going to be a world that we won't be able to recognize. I'm not talking about singularity, Kurzweil style with robots, human level intelligence. It is just machines will be able to learn functions. That's the goal of most AI research.
I'll add to that just a bit. I think, in the very near term, some of the really interesting work that's come out in the last couple of years that I think is going to continue to come out in the next few years has to deal with what you might not think of as machine learning problems, but rather problems of computer perception and problems of the computer seeing the world in a way that's more similar to the way that we see and experience the world. And that is a prerequisite for a lot of the types of interactions that some people believe we should be having, certainly the kinds of interactions that you see in science fiction, where you have a computer that can point a camera at this scene and recognize that you are all people, make inferences about what kind of music you like based on what kind of clothes you're wearing and so on. Those types of things, we find that pretty easy to do as people who've grown up in the world, but even just looking at a scene like this and knowing that there are a lot of people in it has been a very, very hard problem to solve with a computer until quite recently. And some of the deep learning stuff that Memo mentioned is giving us a better foundation to build those types of systems for computer vision, for computer listening, other types of sensing, and those are going to form the bases for a lot of other systems that maybe don't have learning in them beyond that. Certainly also speech input, speech, conversational relationships between humans and computers. Those are things that have been really hard, surprisingly hard for computer scientists. But because we now have all this data, that's one of the main focus areas of machine learning.
Yeah, I think where it's going to head is in brain mapping and stuff. So we just had a case of a person who had lost control of their hands, be able to move his hands based on mental maps that had been learned. And I think when it gets to that, when we're able to actually control things using those models, using our minds, it's going to be really fascinating. So I think there's going to be some really interesting developments in neuroscience, machine learning, and sensors and stuff.
I'm glad we ended on a positive note, because we've blown up the world, society's gone to shit, we've left this rock. We talked about ethics, we talked about trust, we talked about a whole batch of things, which I think is fascinating. When we try to talk about machine learning in art, I guess, but that's the function of art, surely, to discuss these types of topics. So we're going to wrap up now, so I want to say thank you. But I think the panels have been absolutely fantastic, and I agree, it's probably been one of the best things in Resume having these amazing people open their minds to you, so please thank them very much.